And I'll start recording anyway. So go. Hello, everybody. I was just saying to Lee that there's very few occasions. You know, I've got some boats in Cyprus, and I like to travel around because everything's restricted. So at the moment, I'm only paddling on the Grand Union Canal, if you know that. But it's frozen today, so I can't do anything. So I'm a bit knackered. Mr. Cummins, hello, sir. How are you?
Spanky.
Good to see you, mate. Right. So a few people have been saying to me in terms of the returns, and like I say, it's called returns rather than homework because homework is something that people tend to switch off. Returns implies, as I say, there's something coming back. But do you see the point to what we're doing? And this is really important because if you don't see the point to what we're doing, you won't get any buy-in to it. So what do you think we're trying to achieve with the weekly returns? Just give me some thoughts on that. Anybody? Well, Dave, what do you think the point is?
Dave always gets it.
For myself, it's to get people to buy into the process, show some commitment, and at some point in the future, it's going to give you some benchmarks to judge people against. At Thailand, there were people who didn't do the returns, and when it ultimately came to team selection, they were the people who didn't get a seat in the boat because there was nothing to measure them against performance-wise. You know, if it came down to a choice.
Karen, any thoughts on that?
Anybody who's put themselves forward, anybody who's put themselves forward is surely doing something and wants to do something anyway. But if you're doing your own thing, you as a coach or team selection, you've got to have something that you can measure people against.
Absolutely.
Karen, which isn't going to be only.
Absolutely.
And I would agree with Dave. Actually, it's a level of engagement on the crew as it stands now, and just showing progression on the training program as we move through the weeks. Really, I mean, we've got to start somewhere. If we're not starting somewhere, then we'll never get anywhere. So
absolutely, there's a superficial level to it, which that's probably the superficial level in terms of getting some returns. But that engagement is really important because when you think about it, it's a team sport, isn't it? And people are contributing towards it. People have been asking me things like, because I always look at the Prems, and I used to coach the Prems, and people say, are you doing this? Are you doing that? I says, well, yes, but we're doing it slightly differently. So I think the Prems in Hong Kong certainly did some sort of benchmarking activity in December. Well, we do a benchmarking activity every week. Yeah, it's an ongoing progressive thing. And if you look at selection, it's all about providing evidence of inclusion. Okay, it's not about deselecting people. It's the other way around. It's the other way of looking at it. The more evidence we can get, and I really do understand people got different priorities, different stuff they're doing. I get that completely. And I'm not expecting everybody to do everything. However, if there's no evidence from anybody about anything, then apart from a reputation of being a pretty awesome paddler, then we've got to blend them into a crew as well. Because when you think about it, somebody might be fantastic in a surf ski, but it's not the Surf Ski World Championships. It's Dragon Boat World Championships. We've got to not just take, unless somebody is truly unique and can blend in at a drop of a hat. There's very few people I've come across. There's very few people I've come across who can do that. But of course, this is an interesting year because at the moment, unless you've got your own boat, you're not really on the water. So I would anticipate as things pick up and as things open up, OC start paddling, Dragon Boat start paddling, then there'll be a bit more of an engagement. That said, I think we've got a good lot of returns this week, so that's picking up quite nicely. But do you think you're in competition? Well, I'll answer this already. You're not in competition with the Prems. The Prems are a GB squad. We are a GB squad. We're in competition with the rest of the world. Yeah. But do you think you're in competition with the other people who do returns?
No.
No. So who are you in competition with?
Yourself.
Absolutely. You're actually in competition with it. I mean, if you think about it, Lee paddling on Deepwater Bay in an OC, the water is going to be deeper than I'm paddling on a dirty old canal, which is maximum 1.5 meters deep. Of course it is. So, but we're not going to be. But what you do is by doing the same sort of activity You're increasing your fitness, you're increasing your capacity, you're increasing your resilience. And yes, there is a measure as well. You know, we've got what I call fun returns, like the burpee challenge, that sort of thing. That's not strictly part of the return, but if you're doing that, you might as well record it because that's a pretty good activity. But what I mentioned last week, I'm not expecting everyone to go out and do 100 burpees. What I'm interested in is those people who engage in it, and it's a small number. It's not just a case of going out and blasting out 100 and making yourself sick. It's thinking about, right, what I need to do, I need to get from here to this point. From here to 20 burpees, here to 50 burpees, and think about the way I'm going to do it. An example is my son. He's fitter than me. He's much younger than me. He's 22 years old and he's a strapping bloke. But he can only do 100 burpees in 12 minutes. And he's saying, how can I improve it? Think about how you're going to do it. You package it into manageable chunks and you take it up in stages. And that's really what we do when it comes to any form of what I call training, thinking on purpose. So if you're going to be doing a sub 2 minute 500 meters, now you might just jump in a boat and do it, but more often than not, anybody I've ever come across, think about it, right, this is the task, these are the components of the task, there's a start, there's a this, there's a that. We're going to work on each of those components and break it down into manageable chunks and achieve our purpose in a series of sensible steps. I'll be very surprised if you come across any serious athlete who didn't have a degree of analysis in what they're doing. Yeah, you might get somebody really young in their 20s. I think of me in my 20s. Then I'd just go out and run a marathon. And the first marathon I did in 2:53. And being an idiot, the week before the marathon, the London Marathon, I went out for a run. I went out for 10 miles, carried on, and I ran a marathon in preparation for a marathon. Crazy, but yeah, that's stupid. But you see what I mean? It's only if you're young you can do that. If you get to our age, you've got to be a bit more methodical, joined up, thinking about it. So that's what I'm trying to introduce here. The people saying to me, just tell me what to do and I'll go and do it. That's great, but I'd prefer if people think a bit more about the how and the why, not just the what, if you know what I mean. So what I'm trying to introduce is the returns are about sort of this sort of stuff, breaking stuff down, introducing different methods of training. So like I say, you may not be familiar with race skeletons, you may not be familiar with accumulator sort of training or what they call scales or ladders. So I'm going to introduce into this to the homework. So if you're familiar, I keep saying that, homework, returns. If you're familiar with it, fine. If not, you may see some benefits from it. So any points on that so far? Hello, Adam, how are you?
All
Just
right,
if I say to people ladders or half a pyramid, really, what do you understand by that? So, or accumulator training. Have you come across that before? You may do that with your clubs already, or in swimming. I don't know.
Yeah.
building blocks. Yeah. Building.
It's a building block. So what we're doing is we're taking a distance, and in fact, if you look at the returns, it will be a minute blocks or 100 meter blocks. And what I would do, in the same way that we talk about maybe skeletons last week, 500 meter, 400 meter, whatever, break it down into 100 meter segments, and you see what's going on in each of those segments. You'd have to do a number of runs to get the trend, but then you can work on that. And that informs your tactics. An example I may have mentioned last week, World Championships 2015, we were doing 1,000, you do a 1,000 meter run, obviously, in the World Championships, and we were finding that around about 700-800 meters, we're going out strong, and there was a dip in our performance. So what we basically did was put in a tactic. We called it a burst, which is a term I got from Hong Kong, but I use it differently. And it was essentially a rolling race start. There's a bit more to it than that. And that, instead of bringing the performance down at 800 meters, it took it up, and then we sprinted, and we ended up sprinting the last 200 meters and 1,000 meters. Sounds daft, but you can only do that if you identify what's going on in a particular run and put in the relevant tactics for it. So all this stuff about that we're introducing, skeletons, scales, blah, 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 this sort of stuff, it's about informing how we're going to train and other ways, and that will inform what tactics, rather than get in a boat, do a hard start, arse out, head down, arse up, hope for the best. So what I would call, it's about red line training, not red mist training. So we're trying to find the optimum performance, whatever that's going to be, and hold it there instead of going out mad and then dying. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the same way, you might do a a 20-stroke start and be strong, but after the 20-stroke start, there's a transition into optimum performance rather than doing a 70-stroke start and then dying off. You see, that's what I'm talking about. And I'm sure you'd have come across stuff in other sports that you've done that sort of leads into that sort of thing. So I call it, I don't mean it as I call it intelligent training, but it's really thinking on purpose about what you're doing, and it crosses over to everything. So so the just do it mentality is great, but not even those people talk about, just do it, just go out and do it. That tends to be backed up by a huge amount of trial and error that goes into it. So that's really what we're doing here. What I've done, and you may have seen it already, I had a problem getting onto Teams, and that's a blessing actually. But this week's return is all about a ladder or an accumulator. It's basically a minute on, a minute off, 2 minutes on, 1 minute off, 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, 4 minutes on, 1 minute off. So it's half a pyramid or a ladder. Yeah. You can also do it as 100-meter intervals, and there's paddling if you can paddle. There's ergo, same thing, and there's gym work as well. So it's exactly the same format, except with the gym stuff, then we've got 4 different exercises. So I think it's the first ladder is Romanian deadlift, kettlebells, clean and press, and bent over row. But you'll see it anyway. So a minute off. And it's about conditioning, it's about strength, endurance, and that sort of stuff as well. So hopefully that will make sense. But what I'll do on the return sheets is an example. So I'm working a week in front of you. So I'm working out the scales and giving you examples the week before. So hopefully by the time you log on, all you need to do is cut and paste my lines and obviously put your results in rather than my results. You see what I mean? So I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. There comes a point at which that all you need to do is do the training, but I really want you to understand it as well, what we're doing. All the rationale, if you want that, and I'd say it's not everyone's cup of tea, is backed up on documents. But as I said last week, I'm not expecting everybody to go and read 26 pages of rationale. But what I will be doing is saying, if we're talking about ladders or we're talking about scales or whatever we're talking about, if you want the information, it's there. It's there to go and look at it, and I'll signpost where that is, okay? But if you just want the quick and dirty, so to speak, here it is, here's the rationale, do this for this reason, and send us returns. And that should be as easy as that, because people are busy, and I do get that. And it will pick up as things go on. Okay, so far. Any thoughts on that?
That's all good.
Yeah. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah. I'm pretty new to using an erg, very new, and then this one for next week is a sort of, I've no idea how to pace myself for it. Like building up to 4 minutes on an erg. I just don't know where to start, and just any tips if you've got any.
Okay, well, this is a really good question, because this is what I mean by intelligent training, intelligent paddling. If you got on an erg, so have you done a bit of rowing on an ergo before?
I just had one at Christmas, so I've had no training, so yeah.
Okay, typically, what somebody new to it, typically what they do, they say, what is most likely in terms of resistance, the damper setting, 6 to 8, that's roughly the same as water. So they go on it and they pull it as hard as possible, make themselves sick. And you probably find they're pulling something like, they think, well, I paddle around about 60, 70 strokes a minute. So they go as hard as they can, and they end up doing something like 40 or 45 strokes a minute on ergo. And it's absolutely crazy. What you've got to think about is, right, if I'm doing 60 strokes a minute on the water, that actually equates to 30 strokes a minute on an ergo. And I did a little exercise just to illustrate this a few weeks ago. I just went out and I did 5 times 30 stroke pulls, yeah? So I'm 75 kilos, and I set it on damper setting 8. And the first one I did 30 strokes, yeah? And I did something like 31 strokes a minute and did just short of about 296 meters. Did the same thing again, did about 298 meters. Then I did 45 strokes a minute and did 235 meters. Yeah. And then I did, what was it? So 29:30 was about my longest distance. But just by a little bit of experimentation, in a few minutes, you can work out that if you ramp up the stroke rate so much, you haven't got enough space and time to get decent power. So what you're doing is essentially you're like driving a bike or driving a car in second gear rather than fourth gear. And as Andrew, you're just wheel spinning. So you're going for body speed, but that doesn't equate to boat speed. And it's exactly the same in a dragon boat. You'll see people working really hard and they're absolutely knackered, but they're not doing anything. They're not producing anything. And Lee's favourite point is they can be looking like they're working hard and they're knackered and they're laying on the gunnels at the finish, but they haven't got a catch. It's not effective or not efficient. So relating that back to ergo, most rowers, I'm not really I row, but I'm not really a rower, if you know what I mean. They're doing stuff like 26 to 28 strokes a minute. So without, I'll give you the dots and you join the dots, so to speak. So what I suggest you do is you probably be a bit different to me, maybe go out and do 30, 60 strokes or whatever and try at different stroke rates. Yeah. And you'll find what is an optimum for you. Yeah. So if you're new to it, there's a degree of trial and error. So you'll probably find that if you're comfortable rating an OC1 rather is 60 strokes a minute, I'd start at 30 strokes a minute, but be disciplined about it. Yeah. Because there's lots.
And the level?
Go. Sorry, Karen.
And the level? And what level should it be working at?
I would start at, well, let's talk about this. It's interesting actually. I would start about 6, but once again, what I tend to do here is I'll do a week on 6, a week on 8. But if I'm practicing starts that I'm going to talk about in a minute, I'll ramp it up to 10. I'm going to talk about sorts of strength in a minute. So you can actually be quite intelligent the way you use the ergo. I personally prefer rowing ergos to paddle ergos, because if you use the paddle ergo, I've seen, I think I did a session with Buzz a few years ago now, 2016, 2017, and people were getting on it. No disrespect to Buzz. What they were doing is they were going for numbers. So they were smashing the catch unrealistically and sweeping way out the back. Now, if you want to just go for numbers, then do that. But what they're doing is training people in extremely poor dragon boat technique, poor paddling technique, because you know you're not strong behind your hip. That's physiology. So all you really have to do is have a bit of patience on the catch and put a cardboard box, right? A cardboard box 30 centimeters behind your hips. And if you're hitting the box when you're coming back, you're going too far. But like I say, because the way the paddle machines are worked, in fact, there's a new paddle machine come out. I've forgotten what it's called. It's come out of Hungary, and the catch point is higher up. And a simple change in design means it's more replicates the action of the stroke. If it's too low down, then there's a tendency to hammer the catch. That's why I don't like paddle ergs. I'll use them. Rowing ergs are much better because you have to do it with legs back and arms at the end.
Yeah.
So even though the action is slightly different to what we use, the actual way the muscles, the way the posterior chain or the way the chain of muscle action works is more in tune with what we're doing in a dragon boat and paddle sports generally. Yeah. And obviously you're not going past it because all the running gears or the steering, the apparatus is in front of you. Yeah.
Yes.
So the answer is just don't go mad on it. Just I would go out and I'd do some standard runs of a minute, couple of minutes, or there's a great function on it. Have a look at the functions. There's a great function. It's basically 500 meters, minute off, 500 meters, minute off. So I'd try that, just stick that on, and you can do as many as you want. But do take the rest, because any conditioning training, the rest is important as the on interval. Yeah. You see what I mean? Because that's where you're really training your heart, training condition, and you're getting fitter. And everyone knows, everyone says the best training is HIIT style training. And when you're young and stupid, like I used to be, I mean, I was a paratrooper, the most stupid bunch in the world. You know, a Royal Marine would climb over a wall, paratrooper would bash through it. That's the way they train them. So I wouldn't bother about intervals. I think an interval is a waste of time. It's a waste of life. So you just go and knock it out one after the other, but conditioning yourself better. So I'm not as fit as I was in my 20s, but I hope my training is more intelligent. So trial and error, but do tell me what you do, because I'm interested to see how you progress. Yeah.
There's some really good introductory videos on the Concept 2 website.
Yeah.
So if you want to look at those, and they go through dampness settings and stroke rate, and you know, basically echoes what Tim's just sent about a lower stroke rate delivers more power. But it's the Concept 2 website.
Drag factor.
Thanks.
Yeah, and when it comes to Andrew's point, exactly, when it comes to if you're using that as a selection method, and we will be, then if you're there's different ways of doing it, but the one that I've used most is the notional 120 kilo paddler. This is Jonah Lomu in his prime. So if you're 120 kilos, which you're clearly not, or nobody is, I don't think, then if you do, I don't know, you do 500 meters in 135 or whatever. And if you're lighter than that, then you get a benefit, because it's all about power to weight. So the lighter you are, the more the higher your score relative. So that's about relative strength there. But say more about that later. But if you're interested in that, that's on the Concept 2 website as well. And I do gym challenges that had the same sort of thing. So for example, to illustrate it, if I was we do a kettlebell, you and me do a kettlebell challenge. So Karen, I'd imagine you're probably under 60 kilos, yeah, as an estimate.
Just yeah.
Right, so there you go. So you're hypothetically.
Good guess.
Well, there you go. That's so 60 kilos. So you're 60 kilos. I'm 74 kilos, and Lee is 82. Say for example, yeah. You might be, might not be, or maybe he's just bulking up. So we go and do a kettlebell challenge, and we do 2 minutes of kettlebells or whatever you want. And so I'm there swinging my 12 kilo kettlebell, yeah. And Lee's swinging a 16 kilo kettlebell, and you're swinging a 24 kilo kettlebell, yeah. Then you need to have some sort of way of saying, well, if you're going to do that, if you're that weight and you're doing that, that's worth that. But if you are lighter than me and you're swinging a heavy weight, then you should get credit for that. Yeah, because your power to weight is clearly superior to mine. So that's the way it tends to work, and that's the way they work it out on the ergo. So it's about your best effort, but it's all about your power to weight as well. And they're talking there about relative strength as opposed to explosive strength or that sort of thing. Yeah. So you see what I mean? So when we do those sort of challenges, it's not just a case of swinging the biggest weight you can. It's thinking about, well, I need to take that weight. I need to be producing it over a period as well. And that's exactly what we do in dragon boats. Yep. So same sort of thing. It's not just maximizing in the first 10 seconds, having a great start and then dying. Yeah. So that's the way we feed into the training as well.
Okay.
So okay, that but try those different things and email me, and we'll feed it into other stuff as well. Because what I really want people doing is not just getting on the machine and blasting it out, but really thinking about what they're doing, some trial and error, higher stroke rate, higher settings, that sort of thing. So
Great. Thanks.
Rewinding a little bit, rhetorical question, I've sort of answered it. How can we train for race starts on an ergo, or can we train for race starts in a gym or on an ergo? What do you think? Question. And if you can, how can you?
Deadlifts in a gym.
Okay. So let's just talk a couple of minutes about starts. Well, I understand that different clubs, what their start is actually a state secret. So I'm not worried about whether you do 666, 37s, 320s or whatever. I'm not talking about that. In terms of starts, race starts on a dragon boat, what are the components of a start? So what's the aim of the start? Anybody? Not
get the boat to planing speed in the shortest possible distance.
Right. I remember this about something Andy said to me in Hong Kong it's about getting the boat out of the hole, if you like. So sort of dead stop, getting it out of the hole and getting up to optimum speed rather than maximum, your cruise speed in the shortest possible distance, and actually the shortest number of strokes. Now, whether you actually, I know we talk about planing. To actually be planing, you've got to be doing, I think it's 13.5 kph, sorry, 13.5 miles an hour, 21 kph. So we're probably,
Yep.
but if it's in your mind, that's what you're trying to achieve. That's where you're going for. You're going from 0 in the hole, dead stop, to optimum as fast as possible, transition into your race piece. Yeah. So do you just get in it, close your eyes, dig as hard as possible and hope for the best? Or is there some process involved?
There's definitely a process involved.
Right. So what is the process? Anybody? So, and Dave, in your team, what team are you in, Dave?
At your club.
Okay.
Well,
So
I'm
what's the
your club.
process? What's the process? Not. I don't need to know the secrets. What's the process they involve? So here you're going 0. Here you're going, hope 16, 17 kph. So you're close to planing, but we might be planing. You might be planing. You might be doing 21. What do you
So
do?
you're obviously going from. You obviously got to get a very heavy boat moving. So the first few strokes are going to be very strong, probably slow, and then you're just trying to build on that momentum, get some momentum moving. So it's
Okay.
building up the from a very slow, strong stroke to possibly a faster, but maybe not so strong stroke, if that makes sense.
Right. So you're
That's
breaking
what the
inertia.
transition.
You're breaking inertia, building up, and then you're achieving your, call it planing or transition speed or whatever. Okay.
So it's almost like you're taking the boat through
Yeah,
gears. Yeah. You're taking it up through gears all the time.
Absolutely right. So we've got some aspect to gears. When you say a heavy boat, I mean, how heavy do you think a race boat can be? It can be as heavy as you want, but what sort of weights are you talking about? So the boat itself is 240, 250 kilos, maybe, plus 20 paddlers. How heavy are you talking about? Any ideas?
Depends on your crew.
I've never done the maths. we used to train on wooden boats, which are 1,000 kilograms to start with, of course. So
Okay, well, fine. But on average, a champion or a race spec boat with an open crew is going to be something in the region of 1,900 or 2,000 kilos. Yeah. Ladies crew, most ladies crews I've come across tend to be around about 16, maybe 17, and mixed crews obviously in between. So you've got a big lump equivalent. I've got a Land Rover outside. So you're talking about this sort of weight. And I wouldn't jump in that Land Rover. Well, I could probably handle it. I wouldn't jump in a big vehicle and stick it in 5th gear and start driving, would I? I'd have to go through the gears. So exactly the same on a motorbike, double tapping through the gears or whatever you're doing. So there's a gearing system. Yep. So most people are familiar with the first few strokes, breaking the inertia. That's really, it's not static strength. Maybe the first one is, there's an element of explosive strength involved in there. So these gears, I call it, I call it initiate, accelerate, consolidate, dominate. There's 4 stages to it, if you like. Depends how you do it. The fastest I've ever got a dragon boat up to speed is 14, 15 strokes. And that works for small boats, but you're really going some to do that. But if you're doing it too much, then you could be going too high, getting knackered too quicker, because at the end of it, once you go up this gradient, you've then got to transition into something.
Yeah.
For maybe 8-9 minutes if it's 2,000 meters, if you know what I mean. So there's not an element of intelligent how you can do it as well. So Adam, how would you do it? So we've got some gears. So what sort of, so your first few strokes, how are you doing that in terms of, is it a full length stroke? Is it a full depth stroke? Is it half a stroke? What do you do?
Well, I think it's a bit more complicated than that, to be honest, personally. I think that the speed of your blade coming back is governed by the speed of the boat. That's what's slowing down your strokes. The recovery can be super explosive to get back to there. But if you thrash through the water on the first 3 strokes, you're literally just thrashing through the water and you're not grabbing the water. There's no catch. So in order to get a catch, it dictates that you feel the water and go with it. Then you go bang, you wind it up. So a poor boat will have, not say a poor boat, sort of a novice crew will have rate, 5, 10, 10, 10, whereas for more experienced paddlers, like in an outrigger or something like that, where they're really blending, would just feel that and go with it to wind it up. So the first stroke, obviously the boat's not moving. coming through is very, very tight, very hard. So yeah, we used to go for a half stroke, 3/4 stroke, and then a full stroke on the first 3, and then go into full strokes after that.
Are you talking about, when you say half, quarter, 3/4, are you talking about length or depth or both?
Full depth, definitely full depth, because you've got to get traction on the blade, obviously. But we used to go from, instead of holding the blade out at 45, we used to go straight in at sort of 90 degrees. So the first stroke is standing up almost onto it, so there's a full, then a bit more, and then you finally get your reach. Because what we found was, if you try and get that big leverage when you're out in front, it's a lot of stress on your body. It's much easier to get it down here a bit. So you just do the back end. There's no back end of the stroke, but you don't reach as far forward on the first one. You reach a bit further forward on the second one, and then you go to full length on the third or fourth stroke. That's what I remember doing. But it is a long time since I've been in a dragon boat.
I'm really glad you said it's more complicated than that, because it is a very, very, very complicated piece of work. And it does amaze me that how many, even club crews and quite experienced crews, just get in it and head down, arse up, hit the red mist and go for it. Whereas that's such a critical piece of work. And I mentioned it last time that in crews I've been in before, I mean, given the generally, not always, generally higher athleticism of the Canadian crews, what we were finding year after year was, once we got up to speed, we were basically following down the race course. But because their start was more intelligent than ours, they were getting ahead, they were winning the start, and then they'd won the race at that point.
That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying about getting to top speed in a shorter distance as possible. If you can get to top speed in a shorter distance, you're out in front.
Absolutely. And think about that, the psychological advantage of having your nose in front as opposed to you're playing catch up. Apart from the psychology of it, also you've got dirty water to play with. So it's so important to spend a lot of time on the aspects of the start. But the other thing, just Adam, you were talking about 45 degrees. You're actually sitting there and you were demonstrating that. But I think what you meant was, if the boat's going in that direction, then you meant that's 45 degrees blade angle as opposed to that 90 degrees, what I call the power point, where you're delivering maximum power, yeah? So you're talking about your first stroke is coming in, you're not coming in like that, you're coming in like that. So
yeah,
down as opposed to
vertical blade, but not so far at the front. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Lee's point again, I'm sure Andy will agree with this. It all starts with the catch. And Lee said to me again 10, 15 minutes ago or whatever, if you haven't got a catch, doesn't matter how strong you are, if you haven't got a catch, you haven't got anything, because you can be the most powerful person. And if you can't grab the water, if you can't catch the water, then you'll be using a huge amount of effort and energy and just slipping, and it's a waste of effort.
Yeah.
So I now talk in terms of what you catch, you keep. Yeah. So and you mentioned there's no back end. There is a huge back end of the stroke, but I'm not going to. I'll talk about that later on. There's a big piece of work in terms of working the back end of the stroke. Obviously finishing before the hit, but hold that. But just holding on, talking about starts for a minute. So we've got this idea that you're coming in a shorter stroke. Now there are a couple of Canadian teams and Canadian coaches I know who favour doing the first few strokes with half a blade. I don't favour that, because I agree with you. I mean, we can try anything, but I agree with you that you've only got a certain amount of face of blade. There's a certain amount of force you can apply to that. So I don't see the point of any strokes where you've only got half the amount of force. But you see what I mean? There's different theories on it. But what I've done, a more successful one I've done in the past, and tends to work, but I say there's other options, is to go the first few strokes, these first few strokes to break the inertia, a shorter stroke, and I'll probably take 20% off the front, 20% off the back. But you're focusing on that the more vertical aspect of the stroke in terms of it straight down and generating more power. And as you go through the gears, then you're getting progressively longer. Yeah. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about there? That, I mean, there's lots of different variations on that.
That's what I've envisioned, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to say, people talk about some really, really probably too complex, where they say, I'm going to go in at, I'm going to start at half a, then I'm going to go for 2/3 and that sort of stuff. You can get too complicated with it, because when you think about it, Yeah, if you're doing 60 strokes a minute and you're going for 2 in the water, 1 in the air in terms of proportion of what you're doing, you've only got about 0.6 of a second. And if you're trying to say, I'm going to go in 3/4 a stroke, 2/3, half, you've got to be doing a lot of paddling, a lot of training to really get precision on that. And it adds to the fact that the boat is moving. Of course, as the boat's moving, it's harder to get that catch because the faster the boat, then the more you've got to work on actually grabbing the water and maintaining that force as opposed to weight in the blade. Yeah, you with me so far? So if you have the wherewithal and the real understanding, the water sense to hit 2/3, I tend to go for take off the front end, take off the back end, and keep it for as simple for people as possible. But like I say, I'm happy to try anything, and if it works, and you measure it, evaluate it, assess it, and attest it, the old meat principle. If that works, then we do it. You see what I mean? But there's infinite ways.
I think that's the important thing, is to try all sorts of different ways.
Yeah.
And I know there's a million different ways, so you can't really try everything, but and see what works for your crew.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same as we did in 2017. I mean, people say, what's your stroke rate? Well, the stroke rate is the optimum stroke rate for the boat. Now, once in this sort of early stage, you'll decide what that is, because like I say, you'll measure, you'll evaluate, you'll meet, MEAT, measure, evaluate, assess, test, everything. But once you've decided what it is, that's what it is. So you don't go into a major final and say, I'll tell you what, we normally do 77 strokes a minute, but now we can do 120. It's not, you're just stacking up disaster for that sort of thing. But anyway, well, potentially, unless you can do it. So that's what I'm talking about there. So Andrew, what do you do in terms of your start? So you mentioned going through the gears. Give me some context about what you mean. But I know what you mean, but give me put some flesh on that particular set of bones.
First 6 strokes are really slow and deep. Gets the boat up, gets the boat moving forward, and then the second 6 you increase the stroke rate again, and then the third 6 you increase the stroke rate again. So you're going through 3 sets of gears. First set of gears is getting the boat up, it's lifting the boat, so then you can get the forward momentum, and then you increase the stroke rate to drive to hopefully coincide with the boat speed, because that's the optimum, is to try and get your stroke rate to the same speed as the boat, so you're actually pushing water then. Okay.
Oh, give me just something to consider, because these are things that we try and evaluate. So in terms of strength, it's not static. I mean, when I say static strength, I mean tug of war. You could equate maybe your first stroke to that, but really it's more that explosive strength. The first few pieces, or the whole start is explosive strength, really. But whether your first 6 strokes, your first 4, your first 2, as Andy would say, getting the thing out the hole, whether that's 2 or 3 strokes or whatever it's going to be, it's enough to break the inertia. So what do you think? How much effort do you think you need to put into your first stroke? Bearing in mind, in a 500 meters, you've got 2 minutes worth of effort.
I always try and equate it to deadlifting. The first 6 strokes is almost like you're deadlifting a heavy weight. So you're putting all the effort into the first 6 strokes. The higher you can get the boat out of the water, you can make it move forward. The momentum's easier because you're breaking that resistance.
Okay. And not really, this is about throwing in ideas as well. So I get the point, and I completely, but the way I coach it is, once you've got the boat moving, one of the purposes of the catch is to grab water, certainly, because of the angle of the blade, you're generating a degree of lift, and by the time it comes through that 90-degree point, then you're accelerating a momentarily lighter boat, and that's highly desirable. Whether you can achieve that on the first slower strokes, by the time you've lifted it, it's going to be down again. Okay, so like I say, measure and assess. What do you think in terms of, say, your first, getting the boat out of the hole, breaking inertia? I wouldn't say they're soft strokes, but you do the first couple of strokes strong, but not maximal. And when the boat's moving, then you come in with maximal. What do you think about that?
I guess I need to try it. I can see the theory behind it. I can see the theory behind it, because then you're leaving your strength for the power strokes, then aren't you?
It's an interesting point, isn't it? The way I started thinking about it, I had I was coaching a bloke as a junior, and he was autistic. Now this is relevant because he would focus on exactly the words I'm talking about. Like I'd say to him, he says, "What direction are we paddling?" I'd say, "We're paddling towards the sun." And he says, "Well, the sun's moving." This is, you see what I mean? Yes, I know it's moving at 1,000 miles an hour, but the chances are in the next 3 minutes, it's not going to be moved significantly from where we are. It's not going to start there and end up over there. But because he was that way of, he was very particular. He said, "Well, when I do my starts, the first 2 strokes," he was talking in an OC1 sort of craft. "I just want to get the boat moving. Then I come in, and those 3, 4, 5, the stronger strokes are more effective." And I thought, blimey, that's pretty smart actually. And I measured it, and he was right. Now that doesn't necessarily equate to a dragon boat, yeah. And you've got to have everyone doing the same thing. And I'm not suggesting those first 2 strokes or whatever it's going to be to break the inertia are weak. But you're talking about, your start is only going to be 15, 20, 18, whatever it's going to be. So you want to optimize. Andy's point entirely. Actually maximize and then go to optimize, because like I say, if you just do maximal, if you do the true 100% effort, Eddie Hall deadlifting 500 kilos, 10 seconds and he's done. Usain Bolt 9.57, he's done. In fact, he's slowing down after 60 meters. You see what I mean? So we're not actually going into that creatine phosphate absolute top end. It's probably around about 85, 95%. But you need to be doing enough to get the boat moving to that planing optimum speed and then finish the rest of the race as well. It could be another 8 minutes if it's a 2K. You see what I mean? So that's that sort of stuff you think, well, that's interesting. Well, let's have a think about that. And the only way you decide that's workable for you as a crew or as an individual, I say, is to measure it. And you maybe do a 40-stroke piece, a 30-stroke piece. And if clearly at the end of it, you're traveling a higher top speed or you're traveling more distance, then it's more effective. And it does amaze me, and I don't know if Leo or Andy would agree with this, it amazes me how many people you end up coaching and they've been paddling years and they've never even thought about that. They just think, get in the boat, paddle 20 strokes hard, and that's the start. But it's an absolutely critical piece of it. So it's a race winning, most races, I'd say the shorter distances are won and lost, even 1,000 meters, won and lost on the start.
Yeah, I think there's another point to what you're saying. I totally agree with what you're saying, but the reason I'd say that happens is because, it's like starting a car from scratch. You can't floor the throttle. You're just going to spin the wheels. And when the boat's not moving, you've got to really use kind of the opposite of traction control. You've got to use traction control to get that, otherwise you're just going to splash and spin. So it's probably impossible for everybody to put 100% in on the first stroke. You'll just pull the paddles through the water. So you may as well put whatever pressure you can put on the blade to get the boat moving without cavitating and moving. And then as the boat speeds up, you can start to apply more and more and more. And then you go 100% once you've got a bit of movement and you're not going to be cavitating. So that's what I think happens there. I mean, that happens on outriggers, on surf skis, on everything.
So give me another, in paddling terms, give me another word for traction control. Catch. Absolutely. That's what it is. What you catch, you keep. You grip in water, you hook in water, whatever terminology you're using. But if you don't have that grip on the water all the way through the paddle stroke, then at the very least, you're wasting part of it.
And you normally see that the boats that are making the most splashing at the start don't have a good start.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be, obviously, by introducing a paddle into the water, you're going to be taking some air down into the water. There's going to be some cavitation. But amazing if you end up, and I've done this a little bit in the past, where you do swimming pool sessions where you actually film the track of the blade. It's not quite the same because obviously the swimming pool's not working, not moving rather. But you can get an idea about how much disturbance and vortices and cavitation actually is going on. It's surprising. And as you go faster, I'm sure you've all paddled in the past where you've got somebody who's got a very messy catch and you're 2 or 3 seats behind them and you're coming into the water and you're just hitting a bubble of air.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time looking at the efficiency of the stroke, not just the stroke itself. Yeah. Rod, any thoughts on that? Hello, mate.
Yeah, agree with everything said so far. But I think end of the day, you need to it's got to be with what your crew can do. And even if you do an amazing start, just say a 40, 50 piece start, and it's the best start ever. If the crew can't maintain it after the start, there's no point, right? You might be better off with a smaller start. The other thing which I always look at is the psychology of the crew. I've been with so many great crews that have a great chug when they're training. After the start, if they're behind, they just lose it.
Yeah.
So I've got to see what the crew does.
Absolutely.
Why are you smiling, puss?
Absolutely, 100%, and that's
I
why.
wasn't in that boat.
So when do you think? I mean, this. I'll jump out of this and I'm back into this again. The psychology piece. You know, it's not just a case of getting together and all being the boys and the girls in the boat, and that's great. That's all a big part of it. But when does the race psychology aspect? When does that start? I've known crews in the past who've sort of at a competition, they've gone away, they have a huddle, they've got around together, and they've done their psychology bit. Right.
A lot of that's race experience.
I think it starts now, mate. Sorry, it started.
It starts now. It starts now.
Yeah.
Even getting people together doing the same thing, even though you'll probably see myself and Tom doing different challenges. You think, well, what's the point of doing a kettlebell challenge or a strength and conditioning challenge? It's all part of it. The fact that you're doing something, so I'm swinging a few kettlebells here, Rod's doing the same thing in Hong Kong, and we're coming together in a few weeks' time to do a challenge. You're working together, you're getting, even though we're working for the crew, in the crew as part of it, even though we're ultimately training for the major 500s, hopefully in Hong Kong in 10 months' time, 8 months' time. It's all part of it. So a lot of the stuff we're doing about getting people working together is all about that as well. Yeah. Now you can't peak too early. I used to think when I first started all this dragon boat stuff that the psychology of it was something in the region of 50%. Now I think it's above 90% because you go to a major championship, everyone is fit or should be, and if they're not, they're way off the back. Everyone's fit, everyone's conditioned, everyone's trained, and we mentioned it last week. It's the old Muhammad Ali. You've got to have the skill and the will, but the will has to be stronger than the skill. And it's, how many races have you been in where there's been strapping crews, get the head behind and the heads down? So you have to experience. I mean, it's limited opportunity to experience that, but it's part of the game, isn't it? If you're strong, if you're mentally resilient, then you're going to be better than the competition. Yeah. And everyone's going to, you go to the World Championships, there might be a couple of token crews there. It sometimes happens, but everybody there is going to be a top crew. Yeah. And it's the same as any competition when you think about it. Yeah. Any thoughts on that from your experience about sort of mental aspects, psychology? Yeah. Generally agree? Yeah. Okay. So what in terms of your train, last point really today, because I'm talking for nearly an hour, and we'll return to this and we'll return to starts again. Every session I do in a dragon boat has starts, it has focus pieces, aspects of the start. I'll cover this and I'll go on to strengths and stuff. So when your training starts, do you in your dragon boats or even in your single boats, do you break it down? So if it's, for example, if you do hypothetically, say you do 6-6-6 big three transition, so you've got a 20 stroke start. Yep. First three shorter, deeper, whatever, but then so you've got 6, 6 and 6. Do you break those down? So you get in your dragon boat or you're getting your single boat or on your ergo and you just focus on the first 6 strokes. Do the first 6 strokes. Do the first 6 strokes. Get it better, get it better, get it. Then do the 6 strokes, next 6 strokes. So if you like the initiate, accelerate bit. And then when you're sort of happy with that, then you do the first 3 sets, so the different gears. So that's really I mean, I'm sure a lot of you do that, but it's only when you start doing that sort of level, it's quite intricate. You really understand what's going on. So you'll probably see us in dragon boats. I'm sure Lee will do the same. If we decide the first 3 strokes of that first set are breaking the inertia, getting out the hole, first 3, right? No, not good enough. Do it again. So you're trying to maximize the acceleration piece, getting the boat moving and distance covered in that first 3 strokes. Yep. And then the next 6. And you're doing it again and again and again. You can be hopefully covering maybe 60 meters on your start. But like as Andy says, you're trying to optimize that. So that's that's a bit of that, and that's going to feed into the training we do as well. But let me just, the last point, just talk about sorts of strength. So if I said to you, what sort of strength, well, yeah, what are the sorts of strength you can have? I'll give you one. Static strength. Example, actually like a static hold, isn't it? You're just bracing against, I don't do much tug of war, but you're bracing against the rope. Static strength. Give me another sort of strength. How about explosive strength? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
what do you understand by explosive strength?
The ability to move a certain weight, a certain distance, or a certain height in a shorter time possible.
And there's a degree, absolutely, and there's a degree of flexibility involved in that. So how does that equate? So do we use explosive strength in paddling, or more to the point, paddling a 2-ton boat?
Yeah, absolutely.
So where would you use it, do you think?
All the way through, but mainly in the start, probably.
Okay.
Catch.
So in your start, so for example, if you're in the gym and you've got access to barbells, kettlebells, it's not just a case of swinging a kettlebell. Swinging a kettlebell will be great for the hip flexors, great for your whole body fitness. But if you think in terms of, say, I don't know, you've got to swing a kettlebell, 16 kilos, whatever you're swinging, 30 times. Yeah, good form. It's not just a case of swinging it 30 times. Then you can build into your training. Say, right, I'm going to do that in a minute. I'm going to get as many good quality kettlebell swings in 1 minute of a decent weight. And that's where you see what I mean. So you're training in explosive strength rather than just swinging it for the sake of swinging it. Okay, one more I'll give you. Strength endurance. Yeah. So that obviously feeds into dragon boat training, but give me an example of strength endurance in a dragon boat race. Do you think strength endurance plays into 200-meter racing?
Not so much. Not as much as a 2000, obviously.
Right.
That would probably be more if you're in the middle of the race.
No, I reckon it does. Absolutely. It's like you go to the gym and optimal reps for strength training is 5 reps. Dragon boat is much more than 5 reps. So absolutely.
You see what I mean? So what I'm trying to do here is introduce some idea that, that people will go and do strength training. They'll go and do 1 rep max. So this is your absolute strength, 1 rep max, right? Now, 1 rep max, if you're into bodybuilding, if you're into weight training, knowing your 1 rep max is really important, and configuring this, that, and the other. But I mean, I'll stand corrected on this, but actually, no, training 1 rep max when you're training for a dragon, but it's got its place. But doing 1 rep max, or very, very low reps, very, very high weight, has less significance for dragon boat training. And I'll just, case in point, any of you have worked with a data paddle? Has anybody worked with a data paddle here? Probably a few. Data paddles, the old, there's different variations. There's a new one called One Step Beyond, but the old Merlin data paddle measures in kilos for some reason rather than newtons or watts. So I did some stuff in America a few years ago, and I was surprised that my output, they measure it over 22 strokes, so it's not entirely accurate, is about 30 kilos. The bigger blokes will probably push in 30, 35. Occasionally you get somebody doing 40, but 30 kilos, and the average for that group of people, you'll always get exceptions. The average group of people, the average blokes will push in 15 to 33, something like that, 18 to 33. The average ladies, and there were exceptions, were something like 12 through to 25. And then you occasionally get a lady who's doing 50. But so it's, just roughly, very broadly. So one of the reasons I use a 35 kilo resistance band repeatedly is because if I haven't got access to weights, then I'm doing that strength endurance piece. So you could argue that pushing a smaller weight, 30, 35 kilos repetitively, as Rod says, over a 2-minute period is more relevant to you in strength training, especially if you're limited time, to push in 80 kilos 5 times. You see what I mean? Now you've got to build up the basic strength to do that. So the overload side of things and the progress stuff is important, but as you get more into it, certainly towards the competition, then the strength endurance, lower rate, higher reps, still good form, is more relevant, I would suggest, for that specific, because it's got to be, specificity is one of the principles of training. So it's got to be specific to what you're doing. Do you understand what I mean by that? Yes, you do. Yeah. Yeah. Any questions on that? So
why don't we just do this on a boat instead of in the gym?
Well, because at the moment you can't get into a gym. But you would do this. So what I'm no, exactly.
No, what I'm saying is rather than giving us gym exercises which try to replicate the resistance and effort we put into practice through a race, why don't we get on a boat and practice those kinds of strokes?
Well, we do.
Okay.
We do. And in fact, if you have a look, I'm just putting a video out later on, which is exactly that. Most of the people, I mean, Dubai at the moment is on the water, but they're only on the water 10s in the boat. So they're still doing stuff in gyms. So what I'm saying to people is, yes, if you can do this in the boat, the best training you can do is dragon boat training. However, dragon boaters are individuals in close formation, are they not? So you can still do some individual stuff. So what I'm saying to people is, most people who like going to the gym do some stuff in the gym as well. But if you're in the gym and you're training for a paddling discipline or dragon boat discipline, then think about optimizing the way you do the gym training as well as what you're doing in the boat. And what you might find is one reinforces the other. But yeah, quite right. Yeah, if I have the option of getting out on the canal or pulling on an ergo, I'll get out on the canal and paddle a canal. But at the moment it's frozen, so I'm out on the ergo. But exactly. So in the hierarchy of training, yes, paddling, ergo, weights, but they all have their place. That's my point entirely. Yeah. But have a think about it. And if you're interested, have a look at the video I'm just putting out, because it's basically a 250-meter sprint done with gym equipment. But thinking about, if you're doing it, you could do, for example, 200 meters in 40 strokes. Your first 40 could be with a slightly heavier weight, doing bent over row, for example, replicating the stroke. Switch to a lighter weight, slightly lighter weight for the rest of it. Later on, we'll be talking about visualization and that sort of stuff, but you can actually replicate not just the visualization in terms of your mind, but also how you're using your body as well. But have a look at it and see what you think. And I'm interested in feedback on that. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. That's me. I've spoken for an hour. Right. So that's I like to every now and again, and there'll be more of this. And I'm really interested in your feedback as well on what you're doing. And if it turns out that myself or Lee or Andy or Rod are saying, well, we do this, we do that, and Dave says, actually, to be quite honest with you, I've started doing this. And if it works, then we can share it and all try it as well. So it's a bit of a idea exchange as well. Right. That's enough for me for one session, 1 hour. Let's have a quick round the room. So Lee, any points?
Not really, but I did say that Tom's not here, but S&C, I thought it might be a good idea if we all sort of get into one of his sessions. I say one of his sessions, a selection of his sessions, and let us all go out as a group, because I believe we can do that. So if we get as many people as possible to sign up with him, and I'll get him to send something out, we can all actually do land training together. If whoever's there, whoever's got time, and it's just an opportunity again for everybody to see faces, do the real thing, work together, get the psychology going between people's brains, that kind of thing. Because that's what you normally do that in a boat, but like obviously we can't at the moment. But if we can do it in land training, which we have to do anyway, and I prefer that because I don't like reading loads of stuff and doing it. I'm not really a weightlifting guy. Yeah. So I like someone to be able to like tell me what to do and do it when it comes to weights. It's hit and weights. It's a good mix of stuff actually, which he does for GB.
Exactly, and you all know that you'll work harder in a group because there's always the pair.
Well, we see each other working. We know what we're doing. Yeah. So we can all monitor each other. You can say like, well, wow, he's pushing. I'll push a bit harder. Yeah, we all push each other. Yeah, and even though you're not in competition with your mate, you are, if you know what I mean, and it's going to push you on. So it's always a good psychological thing as well. Brilliant. I'll talk to Tom and see if we can get that arranged. Yeah, because he's got a gym now as well, but it'll probably be outside. I don't know where yet, but he's got places.
Brilliant. Okay, fantastic. Karen.
Yeah, all good. Great. Fine.
Okay. Any questions about anything? Just keep them coming in. If I can't answer the question, or Lee can't answer the question, or Tom aren't, then we shouldn't be doing the job we're trying to do. Yeah. Unless it's not about dragon.
Okay,
Okay, David, any points?
No, all good, thank you.
Brilliant. Adam, good to see you, mate.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. All good. Thanks.
But keep any yeah, the stupid question is the one you don't ask, and it really is important. And you may be doing something in your team that we need to be doing. So yeah, Andy.
I just actually one thing. Do we have a flexibility protocol? Because that's, I mean, I'm paddling 4 or 5 times a week, and the big thing for me is I can get the strength training I need on the boat. You know, just use a bigger paddle, or I surf skis, open the paddle up, or go for hit or whatever. But I mean, when I've had really good coaches work with me, I remember Tennille Hatton, also Kamini Jane, the Canadian coach. They've all said for old men, they said the biggest thing you can do to improve your paddling is get more flexible. You know, you've got the endurance, you've got the power from days gone past. You obviously you need to bring that back, but you need to improve your flexibility.
Really good point. I mean, you've probably heard of the term skills-based training. When you get above the age of 25, but certainly into your 40s, balance coordination, flexibility, reaction time, these are the things that start to fade. So I've got my own little system. I call it FAME: flexibility, agility, mobility, energy. It's basically resistance bands based. I've got loads of stuff on it, and I may be not as fit as I was in my 20s, but I'm a hell of a lot more flexible. And I'm, just a resistance band, I call it the old band of brothers, band of sisters. It's a 35 kilo, lots of things you can do with a resistance band. Fantastic for strength and endurance. And it's all about shoulder flexibility, hip flexibility. It's lower weights, it's higher reps. Absolutely vital. And what I've said this week, in fact, you probably read my mind. If you're doing the gym session, 40 minutes, the first 15 minutes should be flexibility training. So absolutely, definitely. More, especially as you get older, you get less flexible. And we've all seen lots of old blokes in a boat who are maybe strong, but they're just just not moving at all. The more flexible you are, the more dexterous you are, agile. So yes, absolutely. And you read my script. Brilliant. Thank you. Andy.
Yeah. All good. Glad to be a part of it and see what's going on.
You're very welcome. Good to see you, my friend. I haven't spoken to you for ages. Have you Okay. And are you doing any climbing at the moment? Is that is all that?
Lots
great.
of it. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Personally, not climbing myself, but carrying bags around.
Right. Well, you get to a certain age, don't you? Where other people do it, I suppose. Anyway, no worries, my friend. Thank you. Rod, good to see you, mate. Any thoughts?
Yeah, earlier were you saying that the strength endurance was more important? Lifting a weight 200 times is more important than doing strength training? Was that what you were saying earlier?
No. What I was saying is they're all important, but in terms of replicating the dragon boat activity, then most of the races we do are strength endurance based. But of course, you've got to have the basic strength to go with. But what I'm saying is, if you're just going doing 1 rep max between now and next November. So what I'm looking at is contextualizing it and giving people different approaches. You have to be strong, definitely, but there comes a point at which you're tailoring your gym work to suit the paddling work. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
All right, cool. No, I'm good. Thanks. Good to see some familiar faces on this call too.
Fantastic. And lastly, Andrew, Gillian, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, all good from this side. Yeah, it all makes sense.
Brilliant. Hopefully that's a good start. But like I say, we'll carry this on. But what we're doing here will feed into the returns rather than the homework, and will feed into the paddling program as well, which hopefully will start after or soon after the Chinese New Year. Brilliant. Let's leave it there. Thank you for your time. Have a great day. Have a good evening, and I'll see you soon.
Cheers,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Everybody.
See you guys.